Dear students, today we are going to study a new story, The Chinese Statue, written by Jeffrey Archer. The Chinese Statue by Jeffrey Archer is a short story which takes us on a fascinating journey of different people spanning across many generations and their interactions with a mysterious statue. Jeffrey Archer, in his distinctive style, provides us with a unique twist in the tale at the end of the story. The twist is a common occurrence in many of Jeffrey Archer's short stories and even his longer novels. The Chinese Statue is a part of a collection of short stories titled A Cure Full of Arrows. Let's go to the summary of the story. The Chinese statue opens in the present with the lot item number 103 coming up for sale. The item is a delicate piece of ivory. Now we go back in time to 1871 when the statue was first acquired after the Opium Wars and subsequent treaties of the British with China. Sir Alexander Heathcote, who is described as being very precise and exact, is serving as a diplomat in China. It is also mentioned that he has an amateur interest in the art of the Ming dynasty. Sir Alexander, after arriving in Peking, meets the Empress Zhu Hez and gives her a letter from Queen Victoria. The Empress then wishes him success in his term in office and he is escorted out of the imperial palace by a mandarin. As Alexander walks out and admires the collection of ivory and jade statues that adorn in the imperial palace. Alexander's appointment in China is only for 3 years, so he decided to use his time wisely and decides to travel. On his travels, he is accompanied by a mandarin who acts as an interpreter and also a guide. On such a journey, Alexander comes across the small village of Haichuan. He stumbles onto an old craftsman's workshop and finds magnificent works of jade and ivory. Alexander expresses his desire to view the craftsman's work and admires the old craftsman's skill for over an hour. He is full of praise and admiration for the craftsman. As Alexander begins to reveal his love and knowledge of the Ming dynasty, the old craftsman makes a confession that he has an ivory statue from the Ming dynasty which has been in his family for 7 generations. The statue is brought before Alexander and he is convinced that the statue is of Emperor Qing and was crafted by the great Pen Qiu near the end of the 15th century. The only blemish of the statue is its missing ivory base, and in its stead it has a small stick jutting out from the bottom. Alexander admires the beauty and craftsmanship of the statue and expresses a desire to possess the statue. As the Mandarin translates Alexander's words, he realizes that in Chinese tradition, the request of an honored guest, if accepted, would result in the growth of the person in the eyes of his fellow men. The old craftsman, though sad, presents the statue to Alexander. The craftsman gives a final touch to the statue by adding a base before presenting it to Alexander. On Alexander's return to Peking, the Mandarin informed him. Chinese tradition also states that if some stranger has done a good deed, that favor must be returned within a year. Alexander now begins to assess the value of the statue using the embassy's library and comes to the conclusion that the statue is worth about 3 years' salary of an employee of the British Empire. Alexander now wishes to repay the old craftsman, so he writes to his bankers, Scouts and Company in London, and requests them to send him a large portion of his savings. He also finds more about the old craftsman and discovers that his family have been craftsmen for over 500 years and the name of the craftsman is Yang Li. The craftsman now wishes to retire to the hills above the village where his ancestors have always died and leave the workshop to his son. Nearly a year after the statue came in possession of Alexander, he sets off once again accompanied by the mandarin to visit the old craftsman and says he has come to repay his debt and asks the old craftsman to accompany him on a short journey. They set off and after traveling for 2 hours reach the village of a Mantian where they stop near a newly completed small white house of perfect proportion, which Alexander says is his gift to the craftsman. The craftsman is fearful as it was forbidden for an artisan to accept gifts from a foreigner, but Alexander explains that the empress herself had sanctioned this request. Alexander is satisfied with his deed and rides back to the embassy content. Upon completing his duty in Peking, the Empress awards him the Silver Star of China, and the Queen awards him the Knight Commander of the Royal Victorian Order, and he returns to his native Yorkshire, where the statue occupies the center of the masterpiece of his home. After the death of Sir Alexander, he wills the statue to his firstborn son or daughter and requests that they too pass it to future generations. The next character that we are introduced to is Major James Heathcote, who is serving the Queen in the Boer War, and he desired to launch the statue to the regimental mess at Halifax so that his brother officers can appreciate it. Later, when James becomes a colonel, he places the statue on the table outside the trophies, one at different locations. The Ming statue remained there till James retired to Yorkshire and the emperor once again occupied the mantelpiece. The statue, after the colonel's death, passes on to his firstborn, Reverend Alexander Heathcote, and he places the statue on the mantelpiece of the vicarage, where it is appreciated by a few people. Later, when Alexander becomes the right reverend, the statue finds its way into the bishop's palace and it gathers all the admiration it deserved. Many find the story of how the bishop's grandfather acquired the statue fascinating. The bishop, too, before death, wills the statue to his son Captain James Heathcote, who is serving in his grandfather's, that is, Colonel James Heathcote regiment, and returns to it to the mess table at Halifax. The Second World War begins and Captain James Heathcote is killed during the Dunkirk evacuations and the statue is passed on to the 2-year-old son of the captain. Alex Heathcote is not made of the same metal as his ancestors and has no desire to serve anyone but himself. Alexander's mother, on providing everything for her young child, manages create what the grandmother calls a spoiled, selfish little brat. Alex, leaving school, cannot seem to hold down to a job and turns to gambling. He tries to find a system where he cannot lose. However, he loses much of his money and has to borrow to cover his losses. As the debts start piling up, Alex decided to sell the statue of the Ming Emperor. The head of the Oriental department at Sotheby's is convinced that the statue is a fine example of Ming dynasty work. However, after a week, when Alex returns to find the value of the Ming Emperor, he is informed that the statue is a copy and is no more than 250 years old and is worth no more than 7 to 800 pounds. However, The base of the statue, which is in fact a work of Ming dynasty, was valued at a much higher price. The base is entered as lot number 103 and is sold for 22,000 guineas, while the statue is obtained by the narrator for 720 guineas. Let's revise the story. Thank you.